trying to decide what to wear. I wanted to suit up, but decided against it. We are you. We are all part of the same family. We're all dealing with the same things. And I think a lot of people look at Christine and I, my wife, Christine and I, and kind of wonder why we're always running around smiling and glowing. And there's so much I could talk about. It's overwhelming. So I just want to kind of focus on our journey. And our journey is pretty much within the pages of Quinton's messages. It's our journey that kind of shares the epiphanies and the ahas that, candidly, I had no clue. I knew nothing about. I was like so many of us in the world today, in our country today, and I was just focused on my job. I mean, I was totally absorbed by my job. I was trying to be okay by accomplishing and achieving on my job, and I knew nothing about that. And if somebody around me was struggling with the loss of a loved one, I wasn't there. I truly wasn't there because I couldn't fix it. And I think part of me thought maybe it was contagious. I mean, I hate to admit that, but that's where I was. I just want to paint the picture of where I was. I wouldn't have been in a group like this. Certainly wasn't religious. I guess in hindsight I was spiritual. But I was a mess. I got to a point in 2009 where I was ready to get a sign. I was ready for something because I had pretty much alienated my wife and my daughter because, you know, I give my best to the world. You know, the world thought I was a rock star. But my wife and daughter would say something totally different. And my son, our son Quinton, he's an old soul, and I hadn't alienated him. He was always there. You know, I remember a couple different times, lots of different times actually. But one time, 3 in the morning, I was up. Who knows why? Couldn't sleep, and he got up to relieve himself, and he poked his head downstairs and said, "Dad, are you okay?" But that's Quinton, and I think all of us, when we remember our loved ones, we probably remember them being as old souls, rock stars, which is amazing that that's the case. But I got to a point where I was like, I need some help. And I didn't speak the language of putting it in the universe. I didn't pray. I just kind of had a conversation with myself that I'm looking for a sign. And then the things began to happen. And part of our journey is the ahas, the epiphanies, began before Quinton was called home, which sets the stage and puts everything into context, and maybe it'll help you understand why we conduct ourselves the way we do. We changed our plans. We always go to Rocky Point. 2009, we're going to go to Rocky Point again. We always go to Rocky Point for vacation to celebrate my father-in-law's life, who had passed 6 years previously. And this one particular year was a year of the swine flu, and there was a killing down there in Rocky Point proper. And everybody around us said, "You can't go to Rocky Point. You can't go because you will die." They were very pointed. Where I was, this is the only week out of the year that I reconnected with my family. And when I'm feeling good, I talk some stuff. I talk some silliness, and I'm like, I'm okay with dying. I'm going to Rocky Point. So I'm thinking it's me that's going to go. Well, I wasn't that fortunate. But we changed our plans. We changed our plans to avoid death, and we decided to go to Lake Powell. About a month or so, 3 weeks or so, I felt change. And I'm not the kind of guy that feels anything. I'm not in touch with my emotions. I'm not in touch with spirit. You know, I say that now, and now I know better. I felt change, is the way I describe it. To the point that I began to clean up my office. Thought I was being sneaky. You know, I was always the first one in, and I was always the last one to leave. And I started sneaking out my personal effects. So by the time we left for our last vacation as a family of 4, I had no personal effects in the office. Because I just felt something was going to happen. Something was going to change. So we head down to Lake Powell, and the whole trip, we're kind of looking over our shoulder. The whole trip, just something was different. Quinton was different too. Quinton spent a lot of time, he was 9.5 years old at the time, he spent a lot of time staring off into space. And I just want to, pause here for a second and say, it really seems like, at least in our journey, in our life, but in others too, that on a certain level you know it. You know it's coming. And that's amazing. It's amazing that on that level of existence that you can feel it. So we go on this last vacation as a family of 4, and Quinton is vacation park. He's having a great time. We're all having a great time. He's getting all his favorite meals. He's drinking root beer, which is his favorite, but we don't typically give him soda. It was like a vacation for him. And the day before Quinton passed, I had a vision. It was crystal clear, and it came at an odd time. And in that vision, he died. And it just totally blew me away. I mean, I remember it vividly to this day. It was my first vision. I kind of set the stage for differentiating between dreams and visions, which are visitations, if you will, which is very important going forward to recognize when our deceased loved ones are making contact. I mean, it's still how I see Quinton today. He visited me in a vision. But in this vision, he died, and I woke up, kind of, taken back. Quinton's still there with us in the flesh. And I tell Quinton about my vision where he died, and I tell Christine about my vision where Quinton died. And Quinton tells me in a voice that really wasn't his. He says, "Dad, it won't happen like that. I will just swim away." A day later, he was gone. A day later, he was gone. So that kind of sets the stage. I mean, things were happening beforehand, and I don't know if any of you had similar experiences, but we did. The accident itself really didn't make any sense. The accident was just odd. It was a really big aha, because in my life, I had been a risk taker. I had made plenty, I'm a fellow, right? Plenty of bad decisions, plenty of risk taking, and here I am trying to be safe. Thought I had control. I mean, really had that vibe that something was chasing us. Thought I was in control. We had new rubber on the trailer. I had 2 spares. Going to beat it. The trailer failed. We pulled off the road, mile marker 1, Highway 260, just into Colorado, coming home from Lake Powell. And I was ecstatic. I was ecstatic. I mean, my thought was, we're going to beat it. We're going to beat it. We're going to drop the trailer, and I'll be home in 6 hours. I'm going to cruise home, 80, 85, 90 miles per hour. We got this. I asked Christine to call AAA, tell them to come get the trailer, call the owners of the trailer, let them know they can get their trailer and their jet skis in Cortez, and then our reality changed. We were 30 feet off the road. They measured. We were 30 feet off the road. And a young lady, 21 years old, no drugs, no alcohol, fell asleep. She fell asleep and drove over, she drove into us. She hit me and launched me 18 feet. Drove over the top of Christine. Here's Christine, looking as beautiful as ever. I walked up here without a hitch. Did not touch Quinton. Didn't hit Quinton. This is a big aha. What's going on here? Quinton died. Quinton had just gotten out of the Suburban, our vehicle. And he was where I would have told him to be if I thought this was going to happen. He was between the back of our Suburban and the front of our hitch trailer. So he was not hit by the car. After she hit me, she sideswiped the Suburban with so much force that the whole rig moved, and he got thrown violently. Boom. I landed. I look up, and there's Christine's torn and twisted body. I'm aware that something's catastrophic. I mean, as I write, it was like God was there. What a dichotomy is that? And here's the day, here's the moment that my son is called home, and I say, it felt like God was there. I do a quick self-assessment thinking, I must be missing a limb. I'm not. Nellie, my mother-in-law, is running to Christine, and I roll over and I see my son by himself. And he's there, and the hardest part, and we have that. We all have the hard stuff. I tend to not acknowledge it when I'm speaking to a group that doesn't know the pain. We can acknowledge it here. You know, the hardest part for me was seeing the dirt in his mouth. When I tried to sleep, what was it? 12 hours later, my eyes closed, and that's the vision that greeted me. And I got back up and kept moving. His eyes were open, not blinking. His pupils weren't responsive, but he was still breathing. And I was there with him for the next 15, 20 minutes as the first responders began to show up, and he was gone. He was gone. And I was like, God was there. For me, God was there, with his finger in my forehead. And hey, you, Jackson, do I have your attention? Do I have your attention, young man? You're not in control. That's an important point. You know, in this country today, in this world, we like to think we're in control. I certainly thought I was in control. To realize that I'm not in control was a gift. You know, God said, I've got to work for your son. And away they went. The first sign I got was 30 hours after the accident. That night, Christine was flown to, which is Flight for Life, to San Juan Regional Medical Center in Farmington. I was taken by ambulance to Cortez. I finally made it to Farmington about 11 that night, and went to spend the night with Christine. She had multiple, every bone in her body had been x-rayed. She took a blow to the head, the bumper, flesh ripped from her back, broken ribs, broken fibula. Spent the night with her. You know, I tried to close my eyes the next morning, and that wasn't happening, as I said. Kept going all day long. Kept going. And that night, as I lay in bed, I felt my hand being held. Now, I have to preface that I didn't speak this language. And beyond that, I didn't know. I had no clue. I had no clue it was possible. But my hand was being held. That much I knew. I knew my hand was being held. But I had no clue that the dead, which takes on an entirely different context to me these days, can make contact, or that even existed beyond leaving their flesh. I knew my hand was being held. And I came up, I like to think I used to like to think I was a smart guy. Now I know otherwise. But I said, wow, well that must be the manifestation of all the prayers coming our way. And I went with that for a couple of weeks or so. Prayers were just getting going. It took me a while to realize it was Quinton. And I've had people call me on it. Because let's be honest. This is uncharted territory. And we've got people out there that want to tell us, no, you can't do that. Stop saying that. People are going to think you're crazy. Well, number one, I invite them to come tell me that I'm crazy. Truly. I might not turn the other cheek. But I knew my hand was being held. And after a while, I realized it was Quinton. And somebody called me on it. Somebody close to me, a friend, says, how do you know it was your son? And it came across like an accusation. And I kind of took a step back. And I thought to myself, for about half a second, well, how do I know? And I remembered, my son, Quinton, has the softest hands. The softest hands. And when we walked hand in hand. And we all loved holding Quinton's hands. And that he knew that, obviously. Our loved ones know that. They know how to get our attention. That's how I know it was him. And from there, it took me a while to acknowledge that, but we were just getting going. We were just getting going. The first time it pierced my consciousness was magical. I was running. I was on my BlackBerry. I was updating everybody, because we know a lot of people. I was updating everybody, trying to get us home. I was just running emotionally, being busy. The accident happened on a Wednesday. Is that right, hon? It was a Wednesday, wasn't it? Sunday, I was picked up out of the lobby of the Marriott Courtyard. In the Marriott Courtyard, where we're all, a group of supporters, we're all staying, after I left, a medicine man in full gear walked up to another member of our group. And I joke that she's kind of like a flower child. She's my age, but she's open. She's accessible. He waited for me to leave and went to her and grabbed her hands and said, "I've just finished performing a ceremony and I was sent to find you. The little boy wants you to know that he's fine." And went on to talk about Tom is helping the little boy transition. And Tom will be helping the parents eventually. And went on to talk about settlement and how it's all going to work. It's going to take longer than expected, but it's all going to work out. And released her hands and walked out. The gal, her name is Chris Boulders. Her daughter, Layla Boulders, is my daughter's best friend. And they're there with this medicine man. And as he walks out, they turn to each other and they're like, "Did that just happen?" And they look up and he's gone. So they rush to get to the hospital and they're bouncing. They're just, what is going on here? We're about to be introduced to the fact that, and how I signed the book. They get to the hospital and I got to get everybody together. I can only tell this once. And we're like, we panic. We're like, what now? How are our nephews? What's going on? We have a panic. Because at that time, the amazing thing about people and family, and they can lift your spirits. So we have all this family around us, and we're dealing with the death of our son. Got my Uncle Jimmy there, our Uncle Jimmy and Aunt Troy. And Uncle Jimmy became the family patriarch in a moment, and he kept it light. We're laughing. He's doing the best he can with that, doing a masterful job. But at this moment, we're in a dark place. And I'm sitting in the corner, imagining my son alone in the darkness. That was my thought. I'm imagining my son alone in the darkness. And that is not a happy thought. And I'm having this thought when Chris busts in and shares this with us. And what happened, I have to share how it affected me, because it's how Quinton's visits affect me still. We're sitting there in a dark place. We're sad, we're down, our vibration's way low, just how I describe it now. And in this moment where we're told this, the energy in the room changed. We went from being down and sad to all of us lit up like Christmas trees. All of us, every one of us, all of us took a collective gasp. And we lit up like Christmas trees. And my thought was, my son still is. This is a magical moment. This is 5 days after. This is a magical moment. My son still is. Changed me forever. And we were just getting going. Changed me forever. My next thought was, why didn't I know? Why didn't I know? Why didn't I know this was possible? Because if I didn't know, there are lots of people that don't know. What an awful way to find out, which in short is why I wrote the book. Christine and I grieved very differently, and we all do. Christine grieved the way I would have liked to grieve. She let it all out. She cried, 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 was angry. Me, on the other hand, I filled the silence with words. I didn't go back to work right away because I couldn't. But we had our friends came around us and were trying to, God bless them. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to make it better. They were there. They would hold us. They would let us talk. But there was that uncomfortable silence. And I filled it. I filled it with what I've just shared with you. Over and over and over again. And we were still very young on this journey. At this point in time, I hadn't yet seen Quinton in his room. That came to pass. In the middle of July, I saw him in his room. A short time after that, I heard him call my name. And I, you know what, and I just, I have to keep it real. I mean, I joke. I'm dense. I am slow. I truly am in some ways of the world. I'm going down the hall one morning at 6 a.m. and I hear, Dad. And I'm like, wow, this is my son. I wish I would have stopped and said, hey son, how you doing? I tried to have a conversation, but I was just so blown away that I heard my son call me. And it hits me here. It lifts me here. It's not in my head. My head struggles with it. My head struggles with it. With the medicine man, you know, there was that momentary epiphany. Wow! And then my mind started thinking, well, why was the medicine man there? This doesn't make any sense. Get back home, and after the service, I do some research on the internet, and I Googled medicine man, which was way too broad. I learned that there's I think a hospital in North or South Dakota that has a medicine man on staff, which is way cool. It's like, wow, we're growing here. We're becoming more enlightened. Then I Googled medicine man in Four Corners there, and there it was. It was the Council of the North American Church. And it's in the paper. It's 250 medicine men from all across North and South America, right there in Four Corners. At this time, we're there. And I said, okay, I believe. Because you know, it's okay to be skeptical. I ask. You don't want to be gullible. I ask. The visits continue. And here we are. You know, here we are. I want to touch on forgiveness, which was really important to us. And I think it's important to our healing as well. And as I share it, it almost, after almost 5 years, it begins to sound odd, but this is what happened. The context is my journey. When I was a young man, I had a tough, you know, home life was tough, and I didn't drink, and I was too shy to date, but I drove. And I drove to escape. Part of me hoped that maybe I wouldn't make it. And I would ask God on a regular basis, is today my day? Is today my day? The next thought was, please don't let me take anybody with me. Those two thoughts went hand in hand. Who knows how many times it became a mantra. I knew, you know, I did some really foolish things behind the wheel, and I don't want to be responsible for somebody's death. When Amanda Higgins stepped out of the car that took our son's life, she walked over to Christine and Cheyenne. And Christine, God bless her, well, I'm sorry, Cheyenne, my daughter, God bless her, said to Amanda, it's going to be all right. You know, when she said that, she didn't realize at that point that Quinton had been called home. And then Amanda walked over to Quinton and I. Not a word was spoken. I'm on the ground. I've got blood dripping down my face. My son is taking his last breath. And she looks down, and I look up, and the horror I saw on her face, the abstract horror, touched me so profoundly. I looked up to her and realized she was living my nightmare. She looked down at us and saw that she was, from a fleshly world perspective, responsible for the death of another. And I immediately forgave her. Sounds odd. I immediately forgave her. Over the next 2 years, we spent some time with the victim's advocate, the DA, assistant DA, to have the charges dropped. Showed up in court.